It is a story I never imagined I would tell anyone, but it has been something I have carried with me, and now I want to share it, hoping others might understand the journey I went on and why it unfolded the way it did. Let me first explain a little about myself. I have always been someone who tries to live life fully. I am a Texas girl through and through, with long, blonde, curly hair and bright blue eyes. Standing 5 feet 7 inches and staying in shape by keeping up a regular gym routine, I have always been independent, adventurous, and drawn to new experiences. I guess that is why I embrace life's curveballs and tried to see each one as a new way to grow.
For 8 years, I was married.
My ex-husband and I shared many good years and 2 beautiful children together, Jared and Mia. But life has a way of moving people in different directions, and eventually, we decided it was best to separate. After that, I dedicated a lot of time to my kids, but I also started to focus on my dreams again. I wanted to do something that had been on my mind for years, a master's degree in Europe. As I started preparing for my studies in London, where I would be away for 2 full years, I knew I would miss my kids like crazy, but I also felt this was a step I needed to take for myself. My ex-husband agreed to look after Jared and Mia, and we all worked together to make sure they would have the support they needed while I was away. With just a month left before my departure, I realized I needed to visit my family, especially my grandparents, who live on a farm in a quiet, rural area. They had always been a huge part of my life, and I knew this was a chance to spend some quality time with them before I left. So, I packed up and headed out to their farmhouse, where I was welcomed with open arms and a big, homemade country breakfast, courtesy of my grandmother, Olivia. My grandparents, Olivia and Henry, were in their 70s, but as vibrant as ever. They lived simply, surrounded by fields and forests, and it seemed like life out there had kept them young. My grandmother is warm, endlessly curious, and always ready to whip up a meal or catch up on family stories. She was overjoyed to see me and immediately began asking about my life, my studies, and how I was holding up after the divorce. My grandfather, Henry, was a quiet man, but with a strength that seemed to come from decades of hard work on the farm. That afternoon, he was in and out, tending to the animals and fixing things around the property, leaving my grandmother and me to chat. We had a great time reminiscing, sharing laughter over stories from my childhood, and she even pressed me about dating again, reminding me that I had my whole life ahead of me. After a few hours, both my grandparents went off to tend to some of the evening farm chores. I decided it was a perfect time to grab a quick shower to freshen up after the long drive. As I headed to the bathroom, I pushed the door almost shut, just enough to keep it private but not quite locked. The warm water felt great, and I let myself relax. It was nice to have some quiet time to think, to let my mind wander about the upcoming changes and the new chapter awaiting me in London. Suddenly, though, the sound of the door creaking open interrupted my thoughts. Startled, I looked up and saw my grandfather, who had come in without realizing I was there. "Sorry, Emily," he stammered, quickly looking away. I laughed it off, trying to ease the awkwardness.
No worries, Grandpa.
"Just a mix-up," I said, feeling a little flustered but trying to keep it light. He lingered a second longer than I expected, seeming almost surprised. I figured it was just the surprise of having walked in at the wrong moment, and I didn't think much of it as he apologized again and stepped out quickly, pulling the door closed behind him. Still, I could not shake the moment from my mind as I finished up my shower. As I finished my shower and wrapped myself in a towel, I felt a lingering tension from that brief, surprising encounter. I reminded myself it was just an awkward moment, one of those unplanned slips that happen in family life. I shrugged it off, took a deep breath, and went on with my evening. When I joined my grandparents for dinner, the atmosphere was warm and familiar. My grandmother had outdone herself with a meal full of comfort food, reminding me of how much I missed these family gatherings. We spent a couple of hours talking, laughing, and catching up. My grandfather seemed relaxed, adding stories here and there about life on the farm and the little challenges they had faced over the years. Eventually, after dinner, my grandmother announced she was heading to bed early, leaving my grandfather and me to finish cleaning up. We worked in comfortable silence, the sounds of the countryside filtering through the open windows. I felt at ease again, any strange feelings from earlier dissolving in the calm simplicity of the farm. Over the next few days, life on the farm became a comforting routine. I spent time helping with small chores, exploring the woods nearby, and enjoying the wide-open sky that felt so different from the city. My grandparents loved having me around, and we all settled into a rhythm that felt right. One afternoon, as we were working together on some gardening, my grandfather seemed quieter than usual, focused on trimming some bushes near the back of the house. I noticed his intense concentration and felt compelled to break the silence. "Grandpa, do you ever get lonely out here?" I asked, thinking of how far they were from everything and everyone. He looked up, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Lonely sometimes. But your grandmother and I have each other, and the quiet, it is nice at our age." We shared a soft laugh, and I nodded, understanding a bit more about why they had chosen this life away from the bustle. The days rolled on, and each one brought a simple joy: the fresh air, the quiet, and the slow pace. I spent afternoons with my grandmother, cooking or helping her can fruit from the orchard. She loved sharing recipes and family stories, reminiscing about life when she was my age. Evenings, my grandfather and I would often sit outside, listening to the crickets and watching the stars appear one by one. One evening, he invited me to take a walk around the farm as the sun set. We strolled in comfortable silence, the landscape bathed in warm, golden light. I could sense he wanted to talk but was waiting for the right moment. Finally, he looked over at me, his gaze kind but serious. "You know, family is important," he began, his tone reflecting a lifetime of wisdom. "It is good to take time with the people who have been there through everything, who know your story." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I am really grateful to be here," I replied, meaning every word. After that evening, the remaining days felt even more precious. I knew my time with them was drawing to a close as my upcoming plans loomed nearer, but I savored every last moment. When it was finally time to leave, we shared long hugs, and my grandmother reminded me to visit whenever I could. Driving back to the city, I realized how much I had needed this visit. It was not just about family, it was about grounding myself, finding peace, and cherishing the connections that hold us up in life. My heart was full, knowing I would carry these memories with me no matter where I went. The drive back felt different. I had arrived with a busy mind, but now I felt lighter, more centered. The city seemed to rush back into my life as soon as I entered its limits, but the quiet lessons from the farm lingered in my thoughts. Over the next few weeks, I found myself remembering the evenings spent under the stars, the laughter around the kitchen table, and the gentle simplicity of their lives. It was almost surprising how those days on the farm shifted my outlook, offering me a calm I had not realized I needed. My time there had given me a renewed sense of gratitude for my family and a desire to carry forward that same warmth and openness. As I prepared for the next steps in my journey, my studies, raising my kids, and everything in between, I held on to those moments with my grandparents, the ones that reminded me of what truly mattered. It was not the hustle or the plans, but the bonds and memories we build with those we love. And with that grounding, I felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that my roots were firmly planted in the love and wisdom they had shared with me. In the end, my visit to the farm was more than just a break. It was a reminder of who I was and who I wanted to be, carrying forward the legacy of kindness, resilience, and connection. And every time I felt the city life pulling me into its currents, I knew I had a place to return to, where time slows down and life finds its meaning in the simplest of moments. Returning to the rhythm of my life, I realized I was holding on to the simplicity I had experienced on the farm, infusing it into my routines, interactions, and even the way I looked at the city. Somehow, things seemed a little clearer and less pressing, like the pace had slowed down just enough to let me breathe. Whenever I felt overwhelmed, I would close my eyes and remember my grandfather's calm voice, my grandmother's laughter, and the peaceful feeling of being surrounded by nature. They had given me more than just a place to visit. They had offered me a piece of myself I had not known was missing. My kids noticed the change, too. We spent more time outside, found joy in simpler things, and I listened more deeply to their stories and questions. There was no need to rush, no need to hurry. It was as though the farm's quiet wisdom had followed me home, reminding me every day to cherish the present moment. In the end, what I had thought would be just a brief visit to see my grandparents turned into an experience that redefined so many aspects of my life. And as I planned my next steps and took each day as it came, I knew that the grounding influence of my time there would always be with me, guiding me with a strength that only comes from knowing where you come from, who you are, and who you aspire to be. Over time, I began planning more frequent visits to the farm, seeing it not just as a retreat, but as an essential part of my life, a place to recharge, reconnect, and remember what truly matters. The city life, with all its noise and rush, would always be there, but knowing I had a sanctuary where time slowed down gave me a sense of peace and balance I had not known I needed. My grandparents, too, seemed to find joy in these regular visits. They enjoyed watching the kids grow, sharing their stories and wisdom, and, in their way, passing down parts of themselves to us. It was as if we were creating a bridge between generations, something that would live on in memory and tradition, something my children could carry forward. As I sat with them during those quiet afternoons, sharing stories and laughter, I realized how lucky I was to have this connection, this family, this foundation. And as my grandparents grew older, I saw even more clearly the strength and resilience in their lives, the quiet lessons they had taught me without words. Their love, simplicity, and unwavering support became guiding stars in my life, reminders of what is most important. In the end, the farm became more than just a place. It was a piece of my heart, woven with memories, lessons, and an understanding of myself I had gained through their quiet influence. And each time I left, I carried a bit of that peace back with me, a reminder that no matter where life takes me, I am never truly far from home. Those parting moments on the farm would always carry a bittersweetness, a reluctance to leave the calm behind, yet a renewed strength to face the city once more. My grandparents would stand on the porch, waving, the farm behind them stretching out under the big, open sky. My children would wave back from the car, their voices filled with laughter, as if they, too, understood the specialness of this place, even if they couldn't yet put it into words. Each time I drove away, watching the farmhouse grow smaller in the rearview mirror, I felt a quiet promise form inside me, a promise to keep returning, to carry forward the values, stories, and love that my grandparents had woven into me. Life in the city was demanding, often chaotic, but the farm remained, a sanctuary that we could return to. It was a constant, an anchor, and in knowing that, I found peace. In the days and weeks after our visits, I felt the farm's presence in the small moments, when my kids asked about their grandparents, or when a quiet Sunday morning brought memories of our family breakfasts around their kitchen table. In those moments, I felt connected to something bigger than myself, something lasting and beautiful. The years would continue, and life would bring its own challenges and joys, but as long as we had the farm, I knew we would always have a place to find ourselves again, to remember where we came from. And for that, I was deeply, endlessly grateful. As the city lights came into view and the memories of the farm began to settle, a peaceful resolve filled me. Life would resume its usual tempo, work, school, the steady hum of the everyday, but this time I felt grounded, as though the quiet strength of my grandparents had taken root in me. Each small reminder of our time together, the smell of coffee, a moment of silence, a golden sunset peeking through the city skyline, was like a whisper of their presence, a reminder that family and love were woven into every part of my life. My children often asked when we could return, already planning out their adventures on the farm, their faces lighting up at the thought. And I, too, would think about the next visit, already imagining that first breath of fresh, country air and the warm welcome that would be waiting for us. Time on the farm had its own rhythm, one that slowed everything down and let us reconnect. I realized that no matter where life led us or how far away we went, we would always have a place to return to, a place that would keep us whole. And as I closed the door to our home, carrying those precious memories with me, I felt a sense of gratitude that words could not capture, a gratitude for the simplicity of family, for the legacy of love my grandparents had created, and for the endless gift of having a place to belong. Days flowed back into their familiar patterns, and yet, everything felt just a bit richer. I carried the ease of the farm with me, a sense of peace in even the busiest moments. My children and I would talk about our adventures with Grandpa and Grandma, reliving every story and laugh as though they were our little treasures. Every now and then, I would call Grandpa just to hear his voice. We would chat about the latest happenings on the farm, and he would ask about the kids with that unchanging warmth in his voice. I knew he missed us, and I could hear it in the small pauses, in the way he would chuckle at some memory or quietly sigh as we wrapped up the call. I missed him too. It was these small moments that kept me grounded, kept me connected to something bigger than myself. Whenever life felt overwhelming or the city seemed too loud, I would think back to the sun-drenched fields, to Grandma's kind smile, to Grandpa's stories that could make the whole world feel like home. I knew we would be back there soon, that we would keep returning as long as the farm stood. And maybe one day, my children's children would visit Grandpa and Grandma, carrying on the same traditions, listening to the same stories. The farm and the family it held together would continue to be our constant, a place where life's simplest, most beautiful truths could always be found. I hung up the phone after each call with a warm feeling, a gentle peace that lingered like a soft echo of the farm's quiet beauty. Even as the city roared around me, those memories, Grandpa's calm voice, Grandma's laughter, the sprawling fields, kept a piece of my heart anchored. It reminded me that no matter where I was or what happened, I would always have that place to return to. And in the midst of everything, I would pause now and then, close my eyes, and let myself drift back there, to a space where everything felt simple, where family and laughter could chase away any worry. I knew that the farm wasn't just a place. It was a piece of my soul, a gentle reminder of who I was and where I came from. One weekend, as the city slowed down and the kids had a break from school, I started making plans to visit again. The excitement in my children's eyes was all the motivation I needed. They talked endlessly about what they'd do on the farm, the animals they'd see, the stories they'd beg Grandpa to tell. It was clear that the place held magic for them, too, a magic I hoped they'd cherish just as I did. Finally, we packed up and made the trip back. The moment we arrived, Grandpa and Grandma were there to greet us, their smiles as warm and familiar as ever. The farm stood as it always had, timeless and welcoming, like an old friend opening its arms. We stepped out, breathed in the fresh air, and let ourselves be fully wrapped in its comfort. The days that followed were filled with laughter, the sounds of my kids running across the fields, and quiet talks under the stars. As we sat around the fire one night, Grandpa looked around at all of us, his eyes gleaming with pride, and I knew he felt it too. This was family. This was love. In those moments, I realized that no matter where life took us, we would always come back here, to the stories, to the love that stretched across generations. And as the fire crackled and we huddled close, I knew that this bond, this sense of belonging, would carry us all through anything life brought our way. The farm was home, and we'd carry its spirit with us, always. In the early morning light, I watched as the kids explored every corner of the farm, their laughter echoing through the fields and pastures. They were building memories, just like I had as a child, and I could see how deeply they were falling in love with the place. Grandpa was their guide, showing them how to feed the chickens, teaching them to fish at the creek, even showing them the old family swing under the giant oak tree. In the quiet moments, I would catch glimpses of Grandpa and Grandma together, still so connected after all these years. Their love was woven into the fabric of this place, just as surely as it was woven into our family. Watching them gave me a sense of hope and comfort, proof that a love that withstands time can exist. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of pink and orange over the fields, Grandpa and I sat together on the porch. I asked him about his life before the farm, about the dreams he had, the challenges he faced. He smiled, his eyes distant with memory, and told me stories of his youth, of the first time he laid eyes on Grandma, and of the hard work it took to build the farm up to what it was now. His words were steady and warm, a reminder of the strength and resilience that built our family. "I never expected life to turn out exactly as it did," he said with a chuckle, "but it has a way of surprising you, of giving you exactly what you need, even if you do not see it coming." Those words stayed with me, a quiet wisdom that seemed to settle into my bones. Life had a way of unfolding in ways we could not plan for or even imagine. And perhaps that was the beauty of it, to embrace each twist and turn, to trust in the journey, and to hold on to the love that carries us through. The visit came to an end all too soon, but as we drove back to the city, I felt lighter, more connected to the roots that grounded me. We waved goodbye, promising to come back soon, knowing that the farm would always be there, waiting, just as it always had. As I looked back one last time, I knew in my heart that no matter where life took us, we'd always return to this place, to these people, to the love that held us all together. As we pulled out of the driveway, I felt a pang of nostalgia, mixed with gratitude. The kids were already chatting about all they would do on our next visit, their excitement making me smile. I looked over at my husband, who squeezed my hand, both of us sharing a silent understanding of how much this trip had meant to us all. When we finally reached home, the city lights felt different, somehow less overwhelming. The pace, once comforting, now seemed like a mere backdrop to the more important things I had been reminded of back on the farm. I spent the next few days reflecting, allowing the calm and warmth of those memories to settle within me. Inspired by the example my grandparents had set, I started making small changes in my own life. I spent more time with the kids outside, teaching them little things I had learned from Grandpa, like how to plant a small garden in the backyard and how to recognize certain birds by their songs. My husband and I also found ourselves lingering over conversations we might have once brushed off, rediscovering the small joys that had first brought us together. Every so often, Grandpa would call, checking in on all of us, always asking about the kids and making plans for our next trip. Those calls became something I looked forward to, little reminders of our roots and the love that stretched across generations. One evening, as the kids played in the yard, I looked at my husband and thought about everything Grandpa had said during that porch conversation. Life might not unfold exactly as we imagine, but it gives us what we need in its own time. And in that moment, I realized that my grandparents had given me more than just beautiful memories. They had given me a sense of belonging, a legacy of love, and a home I could always return to, no matter where I was. In the end, that was the real gift, the knowledge that we were all bound together by the love and resilience my grandparents had built. It was a lesson I wanted my own children to carry with them, just as I now carried it within me. And as the evening breeze swept through our backyard, I felt at peace, knowing that the values and memories we were creating together would one day bring them comfort, just as they had for me. Life would continue to change, with all its beautiful unpredictability, but the one thing I knew for sure was that the love of family, steady, enduring, and filled with quiet strength, would always be our anchor. As I stood there, watching the kids play under the fading light, I felt a deep sense of peace settle within me. Life's twists and turns had brought me exactly where I needed to be, surrounded by love and memories that would shape all of our lives for years to come. In the weeks that followed, I kept those moments close, letting them influence everything I did. Even on the busiest days, I found a way to bring a bit of that calm, that steadiness into my routine. I made it a point to share stories about the farm with the kids and kept them engaged with little lessons on life that Grandpa had shared with me. Sometimes, when the evening quiet set in, I'd find myself longing for the simplicity of those farm days. It became a personal goal to keep that feeling alive, not just for me, but for our family as a whole. It reminded me of the importance of making time for each other, of listening more closely, and of finding joy in the little things that too often go unnoticed. On those rare, quiet nights, my husband and I would sit outside, letting the gentle hum of the city fade into the background. We'd talk, sometimes about the future, sometimes about nothing at all, just comfortable in each other's presence. The influence of my grandparents' love, its quiet, steady warmth, felt ever present, like a guide leading us to a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. The kids grew up with stories of the farm, and as they grew older, they developed their own love for that place. Every visit became a tradition, a reminder of where we came from and of the roots that held us all together. And every time we left, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to carry those values back into our everyday lives. Years down the line, as I watched our children grow into thoughtful, kind, and grounded young adults, I realized just how much those visits had meant to them. They had absorbed those lessons of love, family, and resilience, and I knew they would carry them forward into their own lives, long after I was gone. In a way, those simple days at the farm had given us a gift far greater than we could have ever anticipated, a family bond built on love, patience, and understanding, which would be passed down through generations. And in that realization, I found a kind of peace I had been searching for all along.